There we go. Hey guys, how are you?
Doing well. Yeah, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Why don't you
All
guys
right.
take 2 seconds to introduce yourselves?
All right. Well, I am Pat O'Brien. I am the executive director of the Adoptive and Foster Family Coalition of New York, which is this organization. And I come to this organization after serving for a 2.5 years as the Agape director in Southern Tier and then Long Island. So I got a real chance to see how our support groups in this organization run because I was very involved in them.
And I'm Chester Jackson, and I'm a relatively new member of the coalition team. I'm the helpline coordinator, and we're both members of the Red Shirt Club, which I just noticed.
I feel a little left out. Maybe I should have changed. How long have you guys known each other for?
How long's it
Well,
been?
he always forgets, so I'll just say 45 years.
Oh, so like forever. That's great. That's
Yes,
great.
indeed.
And did you guys decide to start the dad support group together, or was it like one of your
Well,
brainiac ideas?
Chester and Chester might have a different answer than me, and that's always okay. But I didn't think about it. It was brought to me by our staff, and it was our staff that have noticed that when a lot of the dads who come to support groups, when they come at all, they're sort of on the back burner of conversation in the support group. And in my experience as a director of running or helping run support groups, I did notice that. Some dads are very verbal, but some are not, and some don't attend at all. So I think we were doing this as a trial to see if dads would come to a support group if it was just dads.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my opinion. I don't know about.
That's pretty close to being factual, Pat. I mean, it was pretty much a bolt of lightning. It was a suggestion by someone else, and like most things, it made a lot of sense. I think in terms of our expectations, or at least in terms of my expectations, I didn't really know what a dad squad would look like, what the space would be. So I think a part of it is certainly letting the dads decide what we need. I knew it was important in the sense that men don't generally aren't as forthcoming as mothers are in this parenting journey, but we definitely have as many questions and as many feelings and as many attitudes and as many issues as the moms. But it's rare that we're in a space where it's just us. We don't have to defer to the wife or the partner, and that's always a good thing, having a space where you can just be free. So.
It is, and that was one of the things that I was going to say is that dads are typically viewed as being stoic and tough.
Right.
And so is this like a dude space for stoic and tough, or a little bit of everything?
It depends upon the dudes who are in the space at any given time.
And who can join? Speaking of depends on the dudes that are in the space, who can actually join the group?
Well, I would say anybody who's an adoptive or foster or kinship dad. And we welcome all dads, including households where they have two dads. It's just that's the criteria for now,
Right.
Do you think that there's a difference between fathering foster children, adopted children, or kinship care children? Do you think that there's like 3 separate differences, or do you view it as just one whole fathering is fathering type of thing?
Yeah. Well, I personally think that fathering is fathering, regardless of what the situation is, because we're dealing with the individual in the room. That's really the point. So, I mean, whatever the title is, the job description is the same, I think.
And what about you, Pat?
I think if everybody's committed to parenting, it's all equal. However, our emphasis is on the commitment of fathering. So you could be a very committed foster father. You could be a very committed uncle kinship father. And obviously you're a very committed adoptive father. So really, we like to know that the people who come to any of our services are committed to their children.
And do you think that's the same if you're parenting transracially? If you're an adoptive or foster or kinship father parenting transracially, do you think that fathering is different there?
Well, I mean, not in regard to commitment,
Right.
but I think parents who choose to raise children of different races and cultures just have extra things to learn.
Mm.
And this still could be an environment that supports that.
Mm-hmm.
So yes.
Yeah.
So you're looking for all dads across the foster kinship and adoptive community to
Mm-hmm.
come and join.
Yep.
Well, we're offering it to them. You know.
And even those wallflower dads, the ones who don't think they need it, the ones who they just want to let it all go or let someone else do it. It's amazing what happens when you're in a space where you can talk freely. Now, it's hard to convince somebody of that until they come. So my suggestion is just come come and see.
So you
that's
think
the
that
best way to
dads need other dads?
Absolutely.
That male bonding type of situation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I would say it's worth giving it a try.
Yeah.
Some dads might not think dads need other dads, and that's fine.
Right.
But give it a shot.
And do you have a list of monthly topics, or are you just shooting from the hip, contingent on who's in the room?
Well, I mean, one thing that I've learned about attending another group that Chester leads with one of our other staff, Danielle, this particular idea of maybe starting out with a subject and then and maybe only doing a 5 or 6 minute video and then start a conversation and see where it goes. But we're not married to, if we have a topic for the evening, it's all we can talk about is that topic. Often it's the topic that starts off the evening because sometimes people don't know what to say to start off. So we give them a little bit of an interesting tidbit, and then we see what it turns into.
Yeah, and that's a very constructive way to do it, and it also puts you in a position where there's enough flexibility to meet the needs of whoever's in the group. So
Yeah.
that works.
And I
well.
imagine that it forms a somewhat deeper bond between the fathers who are in the group because it's opening up the platform. It's not just like, oh, we're going to talk about this, and someone's sitting there going, oh, I didn't know that this is what it was going to be. So I imagine it's like a little bit more bonding, a little bit more freeing in that respect.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's a very good point. We don't want people to see, oh, the topic of the evening, I'm not interested in that, so I'm not gonna come. Right. It's about support, and we'll throw out a tidbit or an idea just to get it going. But then we see where it leads to.
Yeah, and invariably it gives folks an opportunity to do exactly what you said in terms of opening up about what's good for them or what's on the top of their minds, and that says to the other dads, well, that reminds me of boom, 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 and it does make it easier to be a bunch of dudes sitting around talking about not feeling stuff and feeling stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that fathering is different depending on the gender of the child?
I personally don't. I mean, there are nuances and differences, and we as human beings, we're going to relate to the sexes differently, just as we relate to each child differently. But I think understanding that our focus always is commitment, and at least my focus personally is always commitment is the most important thing, and how that manifests itself, that can have some nuance based on who you are and what you bring. So I wouldn't say as a rule that it has to be different, but I'm sure for some people it is. For many people it is.
Right. What about you, Pat? You think there's a difference?
And I have really no experience. I've only raised a daughter, so I don't know what it's like to raise a son. I don't know if it would have been different. I would like to think it would not have been. But I like Chester's answer on this one.
And as far as the whole adoptive foster kinship community goes, how is fathering when it comes to the trauma of the child? What would you suggest to a father? Is it, are we going with the as I said, the stereotypical stoic tough guy fathering role? Or what would your advice to somebody be there?
Well, look, the advice we give to dads is the same advice we give to every parent. You gotta check yourself at the door in regard to what triggers you. Because when you're raising traumatized children and you happen to be a man who might lose their cool. We just want you to understand that yelling and screaming and hopefully never hitting is just going to be an entirely differently interpreted by a child of trauma, particularly a child who comes to our homes a little bit later in life through foster care, adoption, or kinship care. So it's possible that fathers could be more threatening because, as a general rule, they're larger and they're louder. And we really spend a lot of time educating parents, dads, about the things they need to watch out for when they're raising children who have early history of loss and trauma.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
And the other piece of it is, again, we bring to it who we are. And in my dadding experience, when I went from 0 kids to having kids all of a sudden, I kind of leaned on what I thought were the traditional roles of parents. And what I discovered years later is that each of my children needed that differently. I think my son, who was 6 feet tall at the time and 16 years old, I was trying to be the stoic, always have the answer, Gary Cooper for the old people in the audience, that model. And what I realized years later is that my relationship with my daughter would have greatly benefited from that, which I didn't give her because emotionally she was so much further ahead than my son that she almost had carte blanche. It was like, yeah, I trust you to make decisions. And she would have benefited from that in retrospect, from me being more of a traditional dad with her. And my son would have benefited from me giving him more room, more space to become the man that he is now. Mm-hmm. But I learned that in retrospect. So it's important to come where you are, but again, check your own triggers and issues and traumas.
Right. And you alluded to something that I was wondering too, and that's how has parenting or fathering in this case changed from either when you were each children or when you were fathering younger children. I don't know, Chester, how old your kids are, so I'm just guessing that they're not toddlers. But how has parenting or fathering changed over the course of all of your experiences? And if you could each speak a little to what your personal experience within the adoption, foster care, and kinship care community is.
Well, I guess I could start on parenting change. Very often comes from the inside first, but then during this period there was a revolution in parenting that has happened. So, for instance, I would never have raised my daughter the way that I was raised. I was raised under old school, whether it's getting a smack in the head or getting yelled and screamed at. That was just something I was never going to do. So I learned from my in-parented experience what not to do as a parent. And it actually served me very well that I didn't hit and I didn't scream and I didn't yell. But I didn't know that was a much more impactful form of parenting, to not parent the way my parents parented me. And the revolution of the last 15 or so years is, in the old days, Chester and I used to run an adoption agency, and we actually trained parents in logical consequences and in it's sort of various forms of non-corporal punishments, make the punishment fit the crime and all of that. And the reality is, you had to bring a compassion to parenting when you're parenting the traumatized. You had to bring an understanding and a patience to parenting when you're parenting children of loss and trauma. And then the scientific evidence bear that out greatly. There's brain science involved. There is just triggering involved that just doesn't work for the young brain that is on high alert all the time. The way our parents parented us just were not going to work with our children.
So you broke the cycle. Good for you.
Yeah. In terms of my own parenting model, I didn't have a dad in my life. So my dad was the guy from Father Knows Best. I mean, he was the dad that I came home to from school for a long, long time. And so I had that model in my mind where I could just always talk to him and he'd always be responsive and never raise his voice and always had the answer. So that's who I thought I was being when I went from 0 kids to 3 kids, 2 teenagers and a baby. And that didn't work very well for me because that isn't who I am. I'm more the yelly, screamy kind of guy. And so,
I'm more the yelly, screamy kind of lady. So
yeah. And I think that's the result of a lot of the ways that we were parented, because, that's just the way it is. So I had to learn on the fly. And like I said, so many of the lessons I learned years after they were grown. Like my son came to me when he was 16. His sister came when she was 14. We had a child biologically at the same time. So my wife and I went from no kids to 3 kids in the span of a year.
Oh, wow.
Then we got 2 more over the course of time. And so the lessons I learned from looking back at it, not from living through it, And fortunately for me, I was involved in parent training and doing all that stuff. So I was able to ask these questions as we went along. So I wasn't blind to the mistakes I was making. And that helped me with the repair work. And that's the piece of it I think that's important for dads, especially to get. Because I spent so much time angry primarily because of how my wife was being treated, because women bear the brunt generally of the dirty work. And I spent most of my time being angry with my kids about the way my wife was feeling, and so looking back on it and going through it, I was always able to recognize when, wow, I didn't play that right. It didn't stop me from playing it wrong again, but I was slowly able to just kind of build up that resistance to it. And that's what we're trying to get, dads involved in from the beginning so they understand that they have an emotional role to play in this.
Right. And I think that, again, I know it's a stereotype, but I think that fathers are viewed, again, as being stoic and not emotional, and that they're going to be the ones to, I'm going to tell your father, I'm going to call daddy type of a situation.
Yep.
I do want to say, out of a lot of the dads that I've met, they absolutely are not filling that stoic role. I mean, and maybe because they're willing to get involved, so they're less that. So it could be a stereotype because a lot of the dads that I've been meeting, including the ones in our own group, are really very thoughtful, very they might have taken a back burner in groups where there were dads and moms, but stoic is not how I would describe a lot of the dads that I have met, nor would I describe myself or Chester that way.
Right, and I think that it's great because the times, as you said, Pat, have changed within the past 15 or so years. So fathers are now more hands-on than they used to be.
And I just want to emphasize, not the times, it's the information that we have. It's the science, really. It's the science that has changed in the last 15 years to verify what we always felt was the right way to parent children actually is the right way to parent children, with compassion and patience and understanding and kindness and empathy, and really being there for their brain, almost parenting the brain so we can parent the child. That is science that has come to us in these last 10 to 15 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Pat, you hit on something that I was unaware of, that you and Chester ran an adoption agency together. So you guys really have strong roots within the adoption foster care community, right? How long ago was that? How long did you do it for?
Did it for about 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Maybe a little bit longer than that, because we worked for 2 agencies together. Yeah. And then we went out and founded an agency that placed teenagers for adoption, and we both worked there for about 20 years.
Yeah. And so much of that.
Old.
That's right. So much of my roots, as you mentioned, are steeped in that Pat O'Brien philosophy, what I like to call the Pat O'Brien philosophy. And it really was kind of understanding that we have to do things differently.
Darn.
Oh, I can't hear you, Chester. Did you hit mute? Did you hit mute somehow? Oh, we can't hear you.
And now he froze.
There it is. I'm sorry.
There you go.
Start over,
We missed
Chester. We can
everything
hear
that
you
you
now.
said.
I said, and we just knew intuitively, Pat knew intuitively that in order to get to the children that live and breathe in foster care and adoption, we had to parent differently than our parents parented. And I think that was the great gift, and it still is. I like to think of it when I talk to groups about fostering and adopting, that the greatest gift that we get from this is the opportunity to look at the way we parent our children, because that's essentially how we're living our lives. And that's a great gift. And most people don't take the time to look at it. And so I always think of it as a great blessing, especially when folks are willing to come and share the challenges, because that's where all the meat is on the bone.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And what kind of response have you gotten to this? How long has this group been going on? Have you had many people coming to it?
Yeah.
Well, we had 2 dads, the first group, last month.
Oh, wow.
And we had 8 dads who showed up this month.
Wow.
And I'm expecting a couple of, I think we're going to have that and more next month.
Yeah.
That's great that so many are showing up.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think there's something to the idea of the space. You know, it's very different when, and like I said, I've been doing this work a long time, and most of the groups that I've done, my wife wasn't there. There were a few, very few handful, you know, but it's very different whenever we're in the same room and we're talking about it, you know. So most of the men that I've encountered throughout my career have always been with their partners there, and that changes everything. That changes the dynamic of what you say, what you're thinking, and what you're feeling, and what you really want to see happen. So
you guys really think that dads need other dads?
Yes.
Dads
Yes.
need the support.
They need the space where they can be whoever they are without having the concern of the person they love and live with.
Yeah, I guess that does make a difference. I guess it does. And the one thing, Chester, that I'm noticing in the difference in how I'm speaking and how you're speaking, and Pat, you as well, is that I'm saying fathering because it's a dad's group.
Right.
And you're saying parenting. Do you think that there's a difference between mothering and fathering, or do you think that parenting should be a blanket, and or do you think that there is some type of a difference between mothering and fathering?
Well, you know, if there is a such thing as mothering or fathering, I don't think it's gender specific necessarily. Even though we're talking about dad, so fathering is the absolute logical thing for this conversation. But I do believe that dads have the ability to do motherly things as well. So that's why the gender neutral parenting is always been my go-to.
I like the idea of parenting because that's the overall umbrella, and mothering and fathering, those are like compartments. I'm not one of those people that whenever I hear women say, well, I have to be both the mother and the father, you know, I kind of go like this about that, because the reality is fathering as it's socialized and mothering as it's socialized, you know, as we've all learned, those are 2 very distinct jobs. They're part of the same overall plan, but each of us has a role to play in that. And I think I think parenting covers it good enough, well enough, but I do think there are different roles, and that's okay. That's okay. And sometimes in situations where there's a single person, then they do have to make sure that those roles get attended to the best way they can. But it's not the same. I don't think it's the same thing. Now, like I said, I didn't have a father living in my home ever. Although in my mind, my mother told me who my father was, and every now and then I'd see him at Christmas, at holidays, and as I got older, he disappeared. But I never felt the loss of that, because honestly, I spent so much of my youth watching the images on television, and I was very attracted to the family and the dad in that role. So I didn't feel like I missed it necessarily. But I do think they're 2 very distinct roles, and I think that's okay. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think COVID has made a difference in either fathering or parenting, with, you know, more people working from home as opposed, you know, more people working remotely as opposed to one or both parents, you know, leaving the house at a certain time and not coming back till a certain time? Do you think that has impacted dads emotionally?
What do you think, Patty?
Well, you know, actually, I'm looking at it in the ability to serve the dads, that I think this might be a more comfortable environment for people to join, because we discovered this whole virtual Zoom support group thing basically as a result of COVID. But now I'm thinking this might have been one of the blessings of COVID, is that we can help more families, more dads live in the moment, and they don't have to drive 2 hours or sit in traffic for 2 hours to get there. So I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, COVID has changed everybody's life, and I'm not qualified to say it changed dads' lives more than anybody else's, but it has enabled the coalition to serve more families, including creating this dads group that's made up of a dad who can live anywhere in New York State, and not have to after work have to drive another hour to get somewhere for support. It's right here.
I agree, and I've said the same. I've said the same about COVID and how we've become so technological. It's made us all, I think, independently a little more global, right? We're opening ourselves up more, inviting more people. And as you said, Pat, right, there's no travel. You don't have to rush home necessarily, right? Get dinner on the table, get the kids to bed, do that type of thing. And you're open to far more people by doing it this way. I think that in that respect, it really has been a blessing.
Yeah.
And what about if dads, for your dad group, what if dads have to have their child in the room at the time? Is that fine if they're parenting at the same time that this is going on?
Well, I think we try our best to not have the kids in the room, because that would inhibit what somebody might be able to talk about.
Changes the space.
Obviously, if it's a cutie little 2-year-old that's sitting on your lap, that's one thing. But if it's your 11-year-old, you might want to say things that you don't want them to hear. So it's got to be everybody's judgment, because we can't control the household environment. But that's just something to consider.
Right. And I remember we used to say in the old days that if you don't mind your child hearing it, because the whole room is not going to monitor itself because your kid's there, but I think it's definitely there are things that you need to be free enough to talk without your children hearing. You shouldn't be, saying, oh, they can't hear us, they're not listening. If you're talking about them in any way, they hear it, whether they're in the room or not.
Isn't that? So, I'm sure if I mentioned my son's name, he'd come barreling down those stairs in 2 seconds right now.
Oh yeah. And I think it's just smart not to give them any more ammunition. Don't let them hear them talking about you. Don't let them hear, because it's not helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that dads...
in the end, they were not really talking about the child as much as talking about their feelings related to that child.
But tell that to the child.
Right. That's why you don't.
That's why, yeah. Let them be bowling while you're talking.
What about self-care? Self-care is such a big issue these days. What type of self-care do dads need, and specifically dads of the children that the coalition serves? What kind of self-care would benefit a dad, do you think?
Well, I actually believe the support group in and of itself is self-care.
Yeah,
it's taking the time to do something for yourself.
Right.
I mean, we absolutely teach here loads of how important self-care is, but truly, this is a form of it.
Absolutely, and that's another benefit from not being so topic focused. I mean, it's good to have topics, and there are nights for that when families want to talk about specific things. But coming to the group needs to be healing in some way, and that doesn't mean necessarily fixing anything that's going on in your house, but giving you the space to talk about how you feel. There's benefit to that, and it's medicinal. And men often don't get that unless they're in the bar, and even then, you're not really talking about anything. You're just, you're just being whoever these guys think you are.
Right. And would you like to see this expand to more than once a month? Would you like to see it to get enough people? Or what if a dad who's attended one of your support groups already has an issue on any, the following Wednesday? Or are you allowing them the space to say, listen, if something comes up, you're free to contact us? Or is it something that someone holds over until the following meeting?
I think in part because it's not really designed to be a let's fix your situation meeting, that we're, I mean, from time to time, you may get a call like that. I haven't gotten one. You know, this group is still young, but in other groups, even other groups, you know, mixed groups or other groups, I still find you don't get a lot of that. And Pat used to talk about this in the old days when he always had a number that people can call 24/7. And people always said, it's ridiculous. Why do you have a 24/7 number? Most people won't call you at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't think that's a worry in the sense that this isn't that type of group where, you know, everybody, so I think that's it. Convoluted way of saying it.
And the reality is the coalition is here to serve.
Yes.
Any one of our dads could call our 24-hour helpline anytime that they want.
Yes.
I forget the number. I call it out all the time.
888-354-1342.
1342. Yes. And who knows, if there's a specialty group, we're open to listening to, for anything. So let's just say that our dad's group is there. Anybody can join. And if something else springboards out of that, well, that's what the coalition does. We try to serve the families that we are serving.
This is great. I applaud you guys for doing it. I think it's such a wonderful, wonderful thing for dads to just have that space to go and be with other dads. You know, people talk about, right, mom's nights out and things like that. I think dads need that too. And especially in the times that we're living in now, when so many people are still sticking to their own pod. I don't want to say isolating so much anymore, but they're sticking to their own pod. So having that support, I think, is great. And I think that also the focus on, as the coalition obviously is intended to do, the focus on the adoptive, foster, and kinship care, because, parenting, yes, is parenting, but I would imagine that there are certain triggers, certain traumas that are very specific to the children that the coalition serves, where, maybe someone's neighbor wouldn't understand
Definitely.
that particular situation, right?
That's correct.
Definitely.
A lot of people have extended family members, neighbors, people in your church sometimes, your place of worship, people at school, a whole variety of folks that just don't understand. This is a place where at least you can come and have understanding.
That's great. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. This is a place that you can come to have understanding, because I think that's just so vitally, vitally important to the human race, but specifically, right, to your group and to dads. This is just fabulous. Is there anything else that either one of you would like to say about the group, or?
Call us at the helpline,
354-1342.
24/7, right, Chester?
Yeah. Second Wednesday of every month, right?
That is the
second Wednesday of every month. At what time?
March 10th. Second Wednesday of every month. Yes.
And what time is it from?
7 o'clock until it's over, but usually around 8:30.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you guys for taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing it.
Yep.
This was great. I'm going to stop the recording if I can. Stop recording.